Hello? Hello? Hello there, Nick.
Hello there, Clive.
Hello there, viewers. And welcome to, Feck, what are we doing? Oh yeah, literary as Feck. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. The whole point of using Feck is to not use the word that you just used.
Ah, bollocks. Oh no, I've done it again. All right, welcome you fucking friends to Literary as Feck. And it's my choice, this outing. And we are talking some Manhunt.
Not just Manhunt, but the best.
The best. The creme de la creme of
of Manhunt.
Yes, the collected smegma of Manhunt. So, Manhunt was a crime fiction magazine that ran from 1953 to 1967. There were 114 issues all told, and I wasn't really overly familiar with. Had you,
No, I don't think I've ever even heard of it.
Okay, right. I think it was considered the best of the kind of crime fiction periodicals of the era, of the kind of hard-boiled era. And Stark House, who do a bang-up job bringing, all this vintage crime fiction back into our lives via reprints and very, reasonably priced Kindles as well. Like I've picked up quite a few from them, like a 3-in-1, like all Lionel White novellas or something like that, or, for, less than $5 often. So yeah, they're doing a lot of good, and they've collected. Well, we're talking about a Best of Manhunt Volume 1, but there is a Best of Manhunt Volume 2 out there as well. And Stark House have also prepared something called the Manhunt Companion, which is, basically listings of, everything that was ever printed in Man magazine, and cover art and stuff like that for the real Manhunt enthusiast. Although I suppose they've probably all, got all 114 copies.
Yes, in Mylar bags. Boards in a acid-free environment.
Right, but we don't. But
no.
We do have, yes, the Kindle of the Best of Manhunt, which is 39 stories picked from the pages of Manhunt, and about
some quite long, and some very short. So it's interesting, but it's overall, it's a lengthy compendium for sure.
Yeah,
but it's funny that some stories might only be 2-3 pages long, like real little punchy gems, and then you might get something that's quite like almost like a not quite a novella, but definitely some stuff that's more 40-50 pages long. Right.
Yeah. There's a handful of stories that take close to about an hour to read, maybe. It said 400 pages, but it felt as if because we have the Kindles, right? We don't have them printed, but I feel as if they were printed, they'd be slightly small print, maybe, because it took me a while to get through this.
Yeah, for sure.
Plus, as well, it was something I found I kind of slowly digested a few stories at a time rather than sat down with the whole
march
thing. Yeah. So before we do get into individual kind of, we won't get into all 39, but highlights. What did you overall? Considering you were coming into this completely blind as well, you had no idea what to expect. So, what did you make of the Manhunt oeuvre, or what there is of it in these pages?
Well, I think maybe we should start by saying, like, did you read the frontispiece? Like there was kind of a lengthy discussion of what the magazine was and its ups and downs and who the artists were and all this stuff. And that, I have to say, I kind of zoned out a little bit at a certain point and just skimmed that pretty quickly, and then to get to the meat of the stories. But I was thinking I may go back to it actually, because it was a bit of a slow burn for me, to be honest. It was kind of backloaded. I felt like actually I found it a bit more of a slog to get through some of the earlier stories,
right?
And then coming back, and then I took quite a long break from it because we did other things, and then we started it, and then it was one of the things we abandoned because it was going to be too long for me to be able to finish in time. And so then I came back to it, but I found it much breezier reading the back half of the book. It was almost into that kind of like where they were like a bag of jujubes or some other candy, like where it was very easy to just kind of opal fruits, whatever, pick your candy of choice. I don't know how many opal fruits I could eat in one sitting. So yeah, and I generally speaking, I tended to prefer the shorter stories. I found them to be often like really tight, really nice little kind of like punchy one-twos. There's a couple of the longer ones that were fine, and there's one right near the end where I was like,
I think I know which one you mean.
Yeah, where I was like, holy crap, that story hopefully would not get written today.
Would this be Stranger in the House by Theodore Pratt?
Yes. Hattie, the maid sent by the company that doesn't do a great job vetting its maids, apparently.
Yeah. We'll get to that, but yeah, that was a bit of a strange.
That was an outlier.
yeah. But
and then Harlan Ellison does the one about the rats, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
That one is that one stands out. We'll get to that because I think that's worth talking about, because that one is almost from a different genre. Almost was like from like, because I think that's what was interesting. It's almost like it's a multifaceted jewel in some ways. This book, like you've got all of these different kind of like stories that are all within this hard-boiled genre or whatever, but then certain ones just push it to almost an extreme where like that's almost a horror story, or that's almost
agreed.
Like that one could be in like the one we talked about could almost be in a copy of like Hustler magazine from 1972 or something like that. Like if it just went slightly further than where it ends. It seems like a setup to something that's like from a Stag magazine or something.
Suddenly the waka waka music comes in just at the big reveal at the end.
So I kind of enjoy that. It kept the book from ever getting tiresome. Like it wasn't like it was just an endless series parade of kind of burned out detectives, or or for that matter, like juvenile delinquents. Because I mean, those are two of the things that appear. You do get a certain amount of kind of private investigator stories and a certain amount of JD stories, but they were all different enough from each other. And then overall, there was these other weird little things every now and then. You're like, whoa, like this story is,
it's fairly well curated, I think. I agree with you as well about it seems to be get better as it goes along. And I was wondering if that was simply just a matter of acclimatizing to it a little bit, because
possibly
I spoke a little bit before about how getting back into reading comics after not having read comics for a long time is a bit of a strange transition, because you just don't read like that normally. You don't read like a speech bubble and then look at some pictures, and the temptation is to just jump immediately to the word, because that's how you normally read it. And I mentioned a friend of mine who hadn't read comics in decades and decades and decades, since he was a child, and he's in his 50s now, and I lent him a copy of From Hell. And he just couldn't. He was like, sorry, I tried.
I have forgotten how to read comics.
I don't know how to do it. And it hasn't been that much of a break for me, but it is. And I was wondering with this as well, if it's like, especially with the shorter stories, there's such a shorthand where cliches stand in for for to begin with, so you know where you are, and then the story can play around with the conventions as it were. And I think if you're not used to it, you're like, oh, you know, like, oh God, they're doing this again. But you're not appreciating. They're fully aware of the cliches in place. It's just the way it's like, yeah, private detective, blah blah blah. Okay, good. Got the cornerstones out the way. You know which world we're in, and now you can tell, you know, the specific variation that you're telling. So I'm wondering if we just got more used to it and more tolerant of it, maybe, and knew what we were dealing with.
Potentially, yeah, there might have been a kind of not a learning curve, but like whatever that is, like just a soaking in the atmosphere till kind of.
Because I know we do read, you know, vintage crime fiction anyway, but this felt a little different because we usually read novels. So the form is a little different, isn't it?
Like the short story, or the ultra short story. But what surprised me as well, and I guess we'll get into individual stories, was that it was more hard boiled than I thought it would be. Like a number of the stories, not that they were necessarily excessively gory, but there was an edge to a lot of the stories that I was like, okay, you know, I would have expected to see more maybe in a novel, and less in something that was just mass produced in that way, you know, for easy reading off of like the, you know, barber's shelf or whatever, you know, wherever men read their copies of Rage and Manhunt. I assume at the barber.
I'm not sure. With the follicles growing with every page that you read, the more manly you get. And the barber's like trying to keep up. Dude, stop being so fucking manly.
My granddad used to take me to his barber when I was a kid in Wicklow, and they had this thing. Again, maybe rural Wales had the same thing, but like this seemed to be an age, but it can't have been before they had electric shavers. But they didn't use them. They used this horrible thing that looked a bit like a razor, but that would just tear the hair out of the back of your neck, like by the roots.
Yeah.
And it was always the last thing they would do at the end of your haircut is they would just grab a fistful of the back of the hair on your neck and just tear it out. That felt manly and also terrifying as a child.
Was this the Batman hating grandfather?
That's my grandfather. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right.
He's trying to make me into a proper man.
Yes.
Before we get to the stories, should we talk about this just briefly?
Right.
This illustration was published in one of the issues, and nobody caught that it really looks like he's got a massive hard on.
Yes. And I had forgotten about this. Yeah,
it got them in all kinds of trouble. That they were, I think they possibly had to pulp the entire run or whatever, or they got dragged into court or whatever. But it was.
That's one thing they don't do in this version is they don't include many illustrations.
No,
in fact,
which would have been nice.
That's the only one, is it? I think.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So it's on the downside. And the other thing as well, the one thing I wanted to say before we jumped in. So as you said, it's of variable quality, and there are some things I enjoyed quite a bit, and others less so. But I have to say, from the outset, I don't think there was anything in here that was outstandingly great. Like,
yeah, there was nothing that was revelatory where I was like, I must seek out everything else this person has written and, you know, try.
There was nothing, you know, Jim Thompson, Charles Willeford kind of. There was nothing transition. Something that.
Funnily enough, there are some writers in this. People like Lawrence Block. People like Richard Stark. You know, Donald Westlake is one of the second to last story in here. As Harlan Ellison, there are some pretty good writers in here.
Some others I wrote down, like I didn't particularly go for their stories in this, but writers of note. There's Evan Hunter, Harry Whittington. There's a Richard S. Prather, Shell Scott story in here. I was surprised. A story by Erskine Caldwell as well, which again was not a bad little story, but not, far from his best, right? And not representative, really. But I'm guessing they gave him a decent paycheck for a few hours work, and it does,
There's a Mickey Spillane in there as well, but it does.
I want to talk about the Mickey Spillane one because it's actually kind of interesting. Yeah.
But it's kind of, you feel like these writers they're kind of rubbing shoulders with, I guess that's what there's almost like a democratization in here of like in this kind of magazine where you might have not hacky but more more B grade level writers, and then you've got these strange outliers of like, oh, that's somebody surprising to see in
right.
But yeah, what shall we just? Why don't you name a few stories and I'll see if I can remember them.
Okay, well, yeah, let's go. We'll do one each then, shall we? Do you have a list of story titles or do you not?
No, I'm just going to be skimming through the book here, I think.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what I'll do then, is I'll just mention my list of ones that I wrote down. And then when I get to the end, if there's anything I haven't covered that you would like to bring up. Yeah?
That sounds like a plan.
So, this is going to be a bit weird stream of consciousness. Some things I think I'm just going to mention quickly, and then move on, and then if I have anything. So, so you're talking about the JD thing. There's one on the sidewalk bleeding, which I think might be the first story by Evan Hunter, which is, which is a kind of an interesting, a good example of a lot of the stuff in here, which is not necessarily a fully fleshed out story. It's more like a moody kind of sketch, I suppose. And for that, pretty good. I mean,
yeah. It's to me, it was one of the more slightly trite. It felt a little bit like, okay, yeah, like this is a kind of a concept of like the pointlessness of it all, like, of this street crime, which I thought the later story that comes back to this was more interesting, the Russian roulette story, which I assume is what we'll talk about later on. But of the two that really kind of spoke about this life of the gang life. Well, there's three, right? There's one that seems like it's possibly they're supposed to be a black gang.
Right. Well, there's the Hal Elson one, right? Not Hal Elson, Hal Elson one, Pistol as well, a little bit.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, right. Of the three, I preferred those two to this one. So this first one just seemed a little bit kind of like West Side Story-y. It felt a little bit more.
When you're a jet, you're a jet.
I could just see it as like a ABC, special of the week, like, on a very special episode of, whatever cop drama, this would be the side story about the kid who's really, he's an all right kid at heart, but like, he's gotten in with this gang and
pull him back in. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason I brought it up is, well, because it's, number one is Evan Hunter, who is aka Ed McBain, right? But also just because, it is this sketchy, and it is a good example of some of the stuff that's in here. You can imagine it was a cast off, like from a novel he never completed, or he had a half-formed idea and it's just laying around, and then you get the phone call from man, hey, you got anything, Evan? And I'll think about it real hard and write this.
Yeah,
it might be unfair, and it's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. It's not. But I think it compared to some of the other stories dealing with exactly the same topic, it's the least of the three.
Right. Well, let's step this up a little bit then. So the next thing I wrote down is Mugger Murder by Richard Demming, but I actually remember absolutely nothing about this. Do you remember what Mugger Murder by Richard
open was? Right here, but no. Even flipping through it, I'm not remembering what this is about.
Never mind. So shall go on to this one. I do kind of quite remember because I thought it was I quite like. This was the first story in the collection, I think, that I thought, oh, that's pretty neat. I quite enjoyed it. And this was.
Oh no, sorry, I do now remember. This was the one about the guy who basically goes into like places where he deliberately tries to get people to mug him, and then he executes them.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it was kind of an interesting story. And basically, the guy said, "Well, we have self-defense laws. If this guy can do this as long as he wants, as long as the other person always makes the first move, he'll always be within his rights to kill them." And he become a kind of a serial killer of muggers, because I think he had been mugged earlier, right? And then he realized he could get away with just killing people.
Who watches the Watchmen, Nick? So, the one I quite like was The Collector Comes After Payday by Fletcher Flora, which you were saying about the kind of hard-boiled, mean tone of some of these stories. This is a good example. Mm-hmm. So this is the one, the guy who has a very mean father, abusive father.
Oh, yeah.
Who manages to kind of reach out from beyond the grave and take revenge for. I thought this was quite good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, that one, in that way, I was saying that they didn't all feel like crime stories. That one almost felt like an EC Comics, like a proper like a horror story with that kind of moral, twist at the end.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good call. Actually, it does very much.
You're right. It is grim too. Like all the kind of like him at the bar and his dad beating him up in front of everybody. Just really. That's a grubby little story.
Yeah, I like that one. I think that would be one of my. If I were to do a best of Manhunt, that would be one of the picks. And then some more scary juvenile delinquents in Robert Turner's Movie Night, which is again one of those kind of mood piece sketchy things, but very the message of this one seems to be don't stand up,
put your neck out.
Yeah, don't put your head above the parapet.
Don't make trouble.
No. Again,
that was good. That was and good, like well drawn. And it like effectively quite creepy. It reminded me of those 80s kind of like class of 1984, kind of like it had that element of like normal middle-aged people come a cropper when they they meet a terrifying gang of hoodlums.
Right. And a nice little example of just something, because like you were saying, comparing it to the earlier one, there's kind of different levels of, you think of some JD fiction as slightly more harmless, and it's just guys with combs in their back pockets and duck bills.
The fawns.
Yeah, but this is the other end of the spectrum, isn't it? Where they're actually murderous little fucking thugs kind of spilling out of tenements and stabbing people on the streets. I suspect it's interesting. I suspect like a lot of youth cultures get kind of watered down. I suspect like that's how maybe it did progress, right? Like the original, juvenile delinquent was probably someone you probably didn't want to fuck with until it got, it became cool and Elvis movies and records, rock and roll records came out. Yeah, and turned it into something a bit more, a piece of Americana, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you probably wouldn't have wanted to fuck with, the original class of
you'd be getting. Yeah, you'd be getting shivved for sure. And this is the thing too that was interesting. A lot of the stories have a kind of nihilism.
Yes.
Like they don't have happy endings, or they don't have endings where things are neatly contained. Where the things that are dark or they're often left in this kind of way of like, oh man, we live in a dangerous world. Like you better be careful. And this is a really particularly in your face version of this, but lots of the stories do have these kind of like, ooh,
In fact, in a way, the overall kind of umbrella title of Manhunt is actually quite misleading, really, because you're thinking of something along the lines of, I don't know, The Fugitive or something like that, right? Or these kind of things. But, Shit World might be a
yes,
title for some of these.
Definitely. Yeah, just, very French.
Would have been a good title for this vaccine. So I was thinking you probably quite enjoyed The Scrapbook by Jonathan Craig. This was the one about the guy who's secretly a serial killer of women who goes to work and like, oh, did you happen to see in
yes.
and collects clippings about his crimes, and then slowly kind of gets more and more infuriated and incriminated when no one takes him seriously. Or this is quite a fun, again, slightly comics like Shaggy Dog story, right?
Yeah. But no, that was definitely an effective blow. Like just the because it's quite a funny, it's quite a comic story, but yet at heart it's got a very he's like kind of like the Green River Killer, or one of these people who kind of like he's able to travel to do his murders, and then but then his own hubris, and also he obviously gets off on having these conversations with the secretaries at work about how terrible it is that these things go on. It reminds me of that guy I worked with who used to constantly talk about these people who went to Thailand and the things that they got up to, and wasn't that weird? And the eighth time you're talking about this with a guy, you're like, why are we talking about this again?
Right. Yeah. Or he's like secretly putting little deposits of his urine in people's flasks, and then exactly. How was your meal today, Jennifer, or something, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, gross.
Right, I don't remember anything about The Man Who Found the Money by James E. Cronin, but I wrote it down, the title. So, what happened in this one? Do you remember? What happened?
No. I'll scan.
It's a good episode, isn't it?
Yeah. Clearly, I should have taken notes. There's just such a lot in the book.
Well, no, but clearly it wouldn't have made a difference if you made notes, because I did, and I still can't feckin' remember.
Well, your notes are just the names of the stories.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping that would be enough. In some cases, they are, but for this one, I don't remember anything. I don't remember what happened to the man who found the money. I'm guessing there's a man who maybe found something, money perhaps, but beyond that, I don't remember anything. Anyway, maybe we'll circle around back to it.
Okay, all right.
Because I do remember a little bit about... So this next story was a bit of an outlier as well in terms of a good little story, but more kind of ethereal and ambiguous and enigmatic than a lot of the more hard-hitting stuff. This was The Little Lamb by Frederick Brown. Do you remember this? This is about the artist whose wife hasn't come home.
Yes.
Kind of goes off looking for her, and he quotes T.S. Eliot and William Blake. And I thought this was an odd one.
It was. And it definitely showed like a decent knowledge of the art world and of painting. It seemed like it was either the writer was somebody who's dabbled in painting themselves, or and then grim little tale with a nice little twist at the end.
Nicely done, and also made me think, I probably need to read some more Frederick Brown, because I read that novel Martians Go Home, which is this kind of comedy science fiction thing, which is good, and then of course his most famous is that short story Arena, right? That was turned into that Star Trek episode.
Okay.
And
I don't think I knew anything about Frederick Brown before.
Yeah, I know, but
very conversation.
Yeah, he's known mostly for either his crime and isn't one of his stories the basis for The Bird of the Crystal Plumage as well, I think?
Okay.
Dario Argento.
That feels like somebody I should have read a lot more of then.
Well, that's what I'm thinking as well. And that
and that's a good story. So that
Screaming Mimi as well is based on one of his but he also wrote science fiction but there's a lot of his short fiction. So I'm thinking that's something I need to get a collection of. In fact, who knows, might turn up on Literary as Feck at some point in the future.
Yeah, is there do we know if there's a good collection of his work?
There is okay. A few volumes of his collected short fiction, apparently, which came out a few years ago, which was got good notices. So now you did mention Mickey Spillane, and it is worth mentioning that the girl behind the hedge is quite the story as well. Do you recall this one?
No, apparently I don't remember any of these stories.
I'm trying to prompt you without giving away the ending of this one. So this is the one about a guy who becomes obsessed with a girl, a young woman he sees one day in the garden opposite the other side of the hedge, and he totally
yeah. Okay, yeah. No, say no more. Yes, that's a great ending.
What? Yeah, I mean, like super mean-spirited, right?
Well, yeah, because he falls in love with her because his friend has basically engineered it so that he'll
absolutely
see her and fall for her, knowing full well what he knows.
This was a good one.
Yeah, that was
because Mickey Spillane's one of those ones as well. I remember first reading Mickey Spillane. I think my dad had, I think it might have been The Girl Hunters, maybe. And I think that was the first thing I remember picking up. And if, when I was quite young, 11 or 12 or something like that, and maybe kind of having seen Kiss Me Deadly and heard a little bit about Mickey Spillane, but didn't really. And then the first time you read Mickey Spillane, I think it's like, holy shit, the whole Mike Hammer, really kind of seriously hard-boiled kind of, dames and violence and fast talking and anti-commie rhetoric and like a bit, I don't know, Sam Fullery or something a little bit as well.
Yes, totally.
But it's interesting how that stuff, when you first encounter it, is electrifying, but it does, for me at least, it becomes a little one note the more you read, and now I find Mickey Spillane a bit hard to get on with.
There's a law of diminishing returns there for sure.
It's like the same flavor again and again and again. So it was nice to read something from him that was like, okay, reminded you that he was a very good and very important writer, and because this is something slightly adjacent to what he normally did, right? So I'm wondering if I might want to pick up a collection of Mickey Spillane's short stories rather than read another Mike Hammer.
In some ways, some of the stories that interested me most were stories like that, where crime story, like they really stretch the definition of crime story in a way. So things like that reminded me a little bit of like The Shark Infested Custard, by Williford, where there's no detective in this story. There are no juvenile delinquents. This is just a story of kind of normal people and their lives kind of hinging on some moment where I mean, there's one later on, and I don't remember who wrote it or what the title is. I don't know if it's on your list, but the one about the guys who have their little fishing, like spear fishing group, where they've got the tanks and they go down underwater, and you know the one I'm talking about?
Yes, the one I totally forgotten that was actually in this collection. And the one guy who turns up and causes trouble.
Yes, yeah. Escalates. It's set in Florida, and that reminded me quite a bit of what is it called? Like 92 in the Shade or whatever, the one, with
the Thomas
Peter
McQuaid
Fonda
book.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
the movie based on that. Just this is kind of like hot, kind of moist Florida atmosphere of like people just slowly winding each other up to a point where things are going to,
yes, kind of like things that fall into the crime category for want of a better category to put them in, right? Like,
but sometimes they end up being the most interesting stories just because they have any of those cliches or tropes you're expecting. Instead, you're like, oh, this is a story about a bunch of guys who drink and go scuba diving, and then it takes a increasingly dark turn till and it has a really solid little ending.
That story as well was one that was like made me think, oh, I wish I had time to go out
with a bunch of friends, like spearfishing.
Yeah, gotta make time for that. Gotta put that on the list of things to do. I didn't write that down actually. I can't remember what that story was.
As we go, I might find it as we continue to talk.
The next one I have written down, which I have no memory of, so is A Professional Man by David Goodis.
Okay.
Of course, David Goodis, again, being one of the more famous names in this collection, and another one of those writers, actually, I probably should have read more by. I've never read, for instance, Shoot the Piano Player, or I'm assuming that movement is...
Yes, it's me flipping through the book as quickly as I can.
Not furiously masturbating. At
not
the sound of my voice, my manhunt voice.
I'm getting there. I just got past the Spillane story. Okay, Professional Man by David Goodis.
You're reaching the station.
Oh, this one I remember just being thrown because the character's name was Freddie Lamb in the very beginning of the story, and I was like, we just finished a story that had Lamb in the title. But that's not going to help us.
This is killer YouTube.
Oh yeah, this is great stuff.
Two forgetful old blokes try and remember. Okay, once again, we might
remember the stories they read.
Yes, but then again, it's David Goodis, and he doesn't let his side down, and but then again, so we've also, the next one I've got written down is Hit and Run by Richard Demming.
Right. That one sticks with you for sure.
Okay, what's that one then? Because it hasn't stuck with me.
Okay, that's the one where the woman hits the guy, hits an old guy, and he ends up dying, and she's with her, kind of like she's a rich woman, she's a rich man's wife, and she's out on the town with one of her dilettante other rich guy boyfriends. They hit this guy, he dies, and she basically gets this private investigator to kind of try to hide it for her. And then slowly, as time goes on, he starts to realize that she is deeply disturbed.
Right. One of the longer stories, if I recall. And a pretty good one.
Yes, yeah. All the motel stuff and the bathtub stuff and the ice rinks was all very well observed and yeah.
And Richard Demming as well, again, another name I'm familiar with, but woefully underread. You have any history with Richard Demming?
Not at all. Nope,
right.
I don't think I ever heard of him before.
Speaking of big names, John D. Mcdonald next.
Yes.
Who is someone I do have a bit more history with, and I am a John D. Mcdonald. The story, The Killer.
Oh, so I'm remembering now. Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe not. No, you go ahead, because I'm trying
to... No, I was hoping, because I don't remember this one. We might scrap this episode.
We might have to. Oh yeah, great. So the one you were talking about was before a few ago, we couldn't remember, was the one about he's the hitman, and basically he works for like a real piece of shit mob boss guy who eventually makes him go out and kill his girlfriend.
Or this is The Professional Man. This is the David Goodis one. Yes.
But is that not? No? I don't think so. I think that's. Let me go back.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure
back
that's
at
the
it
one
again.
that you meant. Yeah.
You're insatiable this evening.
Oh, you're right. It is Professional Man. What the hell? Okay. So I whatever. Anyway,
Right.
yes. That's
Anyway,
the one.
note to self: next time we do anthology,
huge anthology
that takes a while to read, to take more copious notes.
Yeah, at least 2 or 3 lines about what the story's actually about.
Yes, it's a learning process. Moonshine by Gil Brewer.
It's coming to me now,
Okay.
but I don't remember why. But
yes,
it
I see a name. Paul Peter, yes, and he's a doctor, surgeon.
No, I can't remember exactly why, but it's the one where a guy takes another guy way out into the wilderness to a moonshine shack or whatever, and that's all I remember. I can't remember why he's mad. Why? Yeah,
it was good, Doc, because I wrote it down. But
possibly,
beyond that, I couldn't tell you.
Possibly one of there's another subgenre within the overall is the stories of angry husbands, right?
Yes.
Whose wives are screwing around on them with friends. I feel like that's one of those stories. It's one of those where there's a guy who's maybe a friend or known to him, and yeah, he takes them on a long drive.
Women cheating on their husbands because their husbands are ignoring them because they're in their shed in the back of the garden reading Manhunt magazine.
Exactly.
Yes, as you mentioned, Rat Hater. This is the Harlan Ellison one. Again, yes, into more EC horrific territory here.
Yeah, and also there's a weird moment where it seems as though I was trying to figure out when the story was written, because it establishes a date in the 50s and then tells us that 20 years have passed. I'm like, is this also a science fiction story? Like, because the dates of the magazine don't make sense for the story to be 20 years after 1957. Like, it sounds as though the story's set in 1977. I was thrown by this little detail.
Oh, right. Okay. That I didn't notice that, but
yeah. But anyway, but yes,
there'd be no reason to set it in the future, right?
No. But yeah, basically, it's another one of these laborious revenge stories. Sorry, machine's talking to me. And a really good one, like a really effective, a really creepy, effective, and kind of rage-filled little story. Like, it's really boiling with palpable anger.
Right. I quite liked all the little descriptions of a scurrying, horrible menace just out of sight, right? But you know that these rats are there.
Yeah,
right?
Maybe James Herbert was a reader of Manhunt magazine, you know?
Right. Pigeon in an Iron Lung by Talmadge Powell.
Yeah.
Reminded me, even though it's nowhere near as grim, of that movie In a Glass Cage. Do you remember this?
No.
This is the film about the former Nazi child killer in an iron lung.
Oh, okay. I've never seen it. I've just heard about it.
Yeah.
Fun times, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your next children's birthday party.
But this, that's a good little story, a good little tight, grim story with a little twist in the end. It also felt like it could very much be a Tales from the Crypt episode, or it has that kind of
a creep show segment or something like that, right?
Yes.
I quite liked Cop for a Day by Henry Slezzer. This is the one with the 2 guys holed up after having pulled some kind of heist or another.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
That's a great little story.
Yeah, and in retrospect, like when the twist ending came, I thought, I totally should have seen that coming.
Yes.
But I didn't.
Not at all.
It's so well written and gets you into it you're so absorbed that shock ending comes out of nowhere, and
makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
it's
but
brilliant.
You didn't see it coming, but you should have. You really should have, but you don't.
Yeah. It was almost cinematically, like it was almost like a jump scare, like on the page, and yet it's completely set up. That was
good. Well, like a well pulled off magic trick or something. Right? Damn! I should have. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my final one is Stranger in the House by Theodore.
Okay.
Yeah, which I don't know how much of this we want to go into, because I don't know if you can really spoil it, because it's not so much about the surprise of it. It's just the fact that anyone wrote this story.
Yes. Yeah. What was the thinking behind this? What was the authorial intent in writing the story and putting it out into the world?
Yeah, it does seem like the opening reel of like a really like a 1973 porno,
Hot Summer in the
film.
City.
Yeah, or called like Honky Bitch or something like that. A bit out of left field, this one. And I'm wondering as well, written with a certain fetishistic intent.
Yep. There's a whole bunch of weird in that story, and just the last image that it leaves you with, which it doesn't spell out, but it's completely clear that last kind of.
Oh yeah, it's very like
in the washroom. We're like, oh, okay.
It's very graphic in so much as you can very much picture the sweating, pop-eyed kind of.
Yes. Have you ever seen Penitentiary 2?
Yes, I've seen all the Penitentiary films. Okay,
but Penitentiary 2 particularly has a performance by Ernie Hudson that is off the charts. Like this is the guy from Ghostbusters.
I don't know. Everything just gets so overshadowed by Penitentiary 3.
Right, but I find Penitentiary 2 more for that reason, because it's more over the top than 1, but more restrained than 3. It's the perfect amount of penitentiary.
More strange than 3. The 3 has the midnight thud, for fuck's sake. Is Penitentiary 3 on DVD? Can we do it?
I don't know. Show? That's a good question. Yeah, we should definitely look at that.
That's a bit of a forgotten series, like a proper kind of urban hit in its day. Like I think each one was successful, but kind of.
To be honest, is there a bad Jamal Fanaka movie? I don't think so. I think I've seen all of his films pretty much, and they're all pretty great in their own special ways.
And amazingly, Welcome Home Brother Charles or Soul Vengeance is now on Blu-ray, which is
yes.
So
sadly doesn't qualify, but one of his last movies I only saw on VCD. I don't know if it was ever properly released. The one,
Street
the one that has
Wars.
Yes, Street Wars. Yeah. That thing is. Well, it's Jamal Fanaka. Anyway,
I'd like to see Jamal Fanaka tackle Stranger in the House. I
think he would, if anyone could do it justice.
Something of, mix it with the Soul Vengeance, and that's you've got a story there, right? But it's funny, one of those things, like when you do get to the surprise ending and your mind goes back and goes over the story, it's
and you're like,
so much more preposterous to imagine this large lady kind of it's
just lifting up pianos, but it sounds like it's putting them down in other places in order to clean the place.
Yeah, to be fair though, even though when it's so ridiculous, it does kind of, I didn't expect it to go there, to be fair.
No, me neither. It actually did blindside me as well, like the policeman for a day story. You were properly like,
but in a less classy way. This is just kind of weird. Like, it does seem like it did belong in another type of
publication
of magazine, like
yes
Ebony Fantasy Monthly or something like that.
yeah
Some kind
but maybe aimed at like clan member, like because there's
yes.
also that element too, right?
Yeah, it's got that
like
whole
deep-seated racism and fear that kind of underpins the whole thing.
Yeah, it's got that whole kind of fear of a black stud mandingo thing going on.
Yeah, yeah, that's a weird little story.
Actually, I wouldn't mind a collection if anyone. I wouldn't mind someone putting out a collection of stories like that. Those weird stories that kind of mix kind of, or that weird kind of crossover between like racism, but also a fetishism for that thing that you're frightened of. It's a fascinating area, right?
But so we didn't mention there is the story about again, I don't remember who wrote it or what it's called, but there's a story in there about two.
Yeah, we don't do that. We don't do remembering.
I mean, the thing is,
and names.
if you think this is up your alley, then it probably is. So get the book. But
are you passing off blame for our lack of taking on?
Back to the viewer.
Fuck you. If you want to know, read it yourself.
Exactly. But the one about the two juvenile delinquents who are kind of basically put up to playing a game of Russian roulette by their respective gangs because they don't want to have an actual turf war or a gang war. So instead they've got these it's very kind of like almost, I don't know what, like Roman gladiatorial, like, we've got our two representatives and they're going to have this Russian roulette off. And it's quite a tense, effective little story. I mean, you could kind of sense where the ending is probably going to go from the very beginning, but there are moments where you think maybe it's not going to have that ending, and so it was not a bad little tale.
Yeah, it's got that slightly like you said, almost inevitable, but like bigger things playing out on a smaller scale, like a lot of themes that are just alluded to, but they don't need to go into it. It's just it's quite a nicely done. I
thought it was stronger again than I thought it and the one about the kid wanting to get the gun. And again, like, it was just, I liked that so many of the stories had open endings and that they had this, again, they talk about like it's been a long time since I studied this, but like, who was it? Was it Robin Wood maybe who wrote about how, the best horror films don't actually contain the threat, like that there's this element of what he would have called the reactionary horror film, which is where somehow whatever it is, whether it's the vampire or the monster is contained either through like science or religion or some other kind of, whereas he always found the most interesting horror films are the ones where just we don't win, society gets and in that way a lot of these stories have that kind of like that feeling of like, okay, nope, that we didn't effectively contain that problem, that's just going to continue to spill all over the place.
Right. It is interesting as well that totally understandable why for many decades before we had the internet to sort all this stuff out and people were only going by half memories and stuff, that people did get confused because both Hal Ellison wrote very effective JD fiction, right? And I've read some of Hal Ellison stuff as well, and he was good at it as well. But Hal Ellison maybe even more so, and it's very understandable that people got a bit confused as to what when you didn't actually have online databases where you could back up and clarify and that kind of stuff. Yes, so
despite the fact that all of these stories apparently evaporated out of our minds seconds after reading them,
Yeah, I mean,
I did enjoy reading all of them.
I did as well. Yeah, just our old manness shouldn't detract from.
Yeah. You probably have young, supple brains that are able to hang on to information for longer than we should have had Robin on this one. This would have been the perfect one for Robin to have guested on. All three of us could have been like struggling for the names of people. And I would say there was one other story that I quite liked because it had a real ending. It was the one where the sexy girl convinces the guy to dump a body for her.
Yeah. Yes.
And I actually didn't see the ending of that coming either. I really thought that was going to go somewhere else, and I was like, that was one of the few satisfying for the reader endings in terms of just being like the little guy kind of sticks it to, the person trying to screw him around. Most of the time, they don't actually, our little characters kind of just get screwed in these stories. But that's one of the few where he's not having it. And, it's quite a funny ending.
Yeah, nice bit of gallows humor there. Yeah, so overall, the best of Manhunt collection is, it's an odd one because I agree with you. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this, and had I taken more notes, I would have enjoyed talking about it a bit more with you as well, rather than obviously enjoyed as well. Enjoyed going for about however long we've been talking, probably far too long. I think if we cut out all the bits of us not remembering things, it's about 5 minutes long, this episode, isn't it?
Yes,
But
take out all the bits of me doing this.
But yes, very sketchily. But on the other hand, I'm not sure if I'm in a mad rush to read volume 2 either, though. That's the thing.
Not right away. And you always wonder with like, did they cream the best stuff off? No, we're back to that again.
Yes.
That wonderful metaphor for Manhunt. Did we get all the best man cream at the beginning?
Especially with you going.
or was there so much man cream that it was easy to spread it across 2 books? So hard to know, I guess. But it kind of begs the question of the Russell Gray book we read before as well, right?
Right.
It's just like, I wonder, is the second volume? I'm still quite curious. I have a feeling I will end up buying the second volume because those stories were so bonkers.
Whereas with Manhunt, because the Russell Gray stuff is so unusual and singular, whereas I think my problem, like I said, I enjoyed reading this collection, but as I said at the beginning, nothing jumped out at me like, oh, I'm so glad I read that before I was in my grave, or there was nothing really exceptional. Like it was enjoyable enough to, and obviously I don't know what it, I might have been missing gold, but now that I've read it and I'm kind of familiar with what Manhunt was, I'm good, I think. Like I don't need to track down all 140, thank God it's it's because I always live in fear of, oh no, I've got another obsession. Oh, fuck, as if I don't have enough things I'm already, tracking down. And so I'm quite pleased that Manhunt is, I've done the Manhunt thing. I've even recorded a really shit YouTube video about me barely remembering it with my other Oji-san friend, Nick. But that's probably okay. I'm kind of okay with Manhunt. I have got an idea what it is. I need not steep myself in it anymore. That's my take on it, I think.
I would agree. So, but I mean, I would still say I would recommend it to anyone who likes their fiction hard-boiled, and who likes, it is a good sampler pack of a lot of the writers who kind of worked in the area, and it's fun and it's varied enough. It's not like we have occasionally also read compendiums where my complaint was like, wow, a lot of very samey material,
which would probably be the case if you had have read all 114 issues of Manhunt, I'm guessing.
Yeah, for sure. but they did a good job of kind of plucking stories that that you don't have that feeling of like, well, I just read 45 different stories about gumshoe detectives, you know, girls in slinky dresses. So, yeah.
Right. So, off we go then. Nick, are you ready? 3, 2.
I don't know what we're doing. What's happening?
1. See who reaches first.
No. We're not playing the biscuit game today. All right. So let's shut this thing down because this was the worst episode ever. Let's get out of here.
Thanks for enjoying the worst episode ever.
Let's scarp.
Yeah.